Yo, welcome to the Cosmic Paradox channel. Like, subscribe, and share.
Okay, so let's really get into the show, right? So the time in this set, I want to say it says 1916, maybe 1906, somewhere around this area, but it's early 1900s, all right? So it starts out, he's the narrating, and we see there's a character. It's a doctor, some Dr. John Hathaway, but he comes to see Roger Burgess. Um, and he prefers to be called Magus or Lord Magus. So obviously he's an inflated ego, man. You see, there's some type of ritual going on when they walk in. They're performing a ritual. Looks like they got a knife, doing some, all type of stuff as they walking by. Now, and he is the leader of what's called the Order of Ancient Mysteries, which is just symbolic to the leaders of these, secret society cults of this time. Because this is what the purpose is of it for. Because these foreigners with this information don't see a purpose for this knowledge or for this information outside of material gain. So, of course, it's always going to be about material gain. So there's a boy who opened the door for him who's seeing him through the house, and it's his son. You wouldn't think it's his son, but it goes to show you how he feels about this particular son because he pretty much overlooks him. And which brings us to the reason why this doctor has come is because he's bought him some sort of grimoire from the museum of some sort, and because it's Burgess wants to summon death and bring his son back to life whom he lost in a war or he lost on a battleship, something that had to do with some war. Okay, and so he's appealing to this man because this man has also lost his son, so he's doing a dark arts of manipulation, preying on this man's weakness and his grievance to get him to bring him and present him with this grimoire. And he's like, of course, we're gonna bring death in. I get death to bring my son back, get death to bring your son back too. You lost your son the same way. So this is what his plan is. This is what his goal is. This is what his aim is, right? So, mind you, he just gets his hands on this grimoire and he just goes straight into a room to perform this ritual. Okay, so he doesn't really know what he's doing. He's really an amateur, but sometimes they get lucky. And it's funny because they compared him to one Aleister Crowley, and one could argue that he actually got lucky when he pretty much channeled or summoned Thoth, but that's another conversation for another day. But I feel like that's the symbolic representation of what all of that is, just put into one character, just to kind of show you, how that kind of goes. Okay, so he wants to summon death. He wants to capture death. So he and his order, they presume to perform this ritual to capture and imprison death. And at this very same time, because mind you, things have to line up. It's never a coincidence. It's just certain mixtures of things coming into play that certain things happen the way that they do. So at this particular time, we have Dream or Morpheus who is out trying to get the creature who is loose in the world. So he is present in the physical 3D world in distant
Now, he's
country.
not.
Too far. He's off in Berlin, Germany, but that's where he's at. So Morpheus at this particular time is attempted to get Corinthian. This is the character's name that he's after. His name is Corinthian. He's a nightmare who has gone rogue. And it's interesting because when we were watching it, my daughter pointed out that he was Jack the Ripper. And that's who, because there's so many legends behind Jack the Ripper. And I thought that was so interesting that I hung on to that idea or that observation on her. She's great at observing movies. We might have to get her on camera and get her to talking with us about some of this stuff. But so he's out to capture Corinthian because he's gone rogue. He's killing people. You're not supposed to be doing that, man. So he has to bring him back in. That's his job. That's his duty. But in this unfortunate circumstance, this ritual, because they are the endless. They all encompass the endless. They just have certain specific realms that they rule over because that's his direct sibling, they're from the same source, it pulled him in and he was vulnerable because Lucian said that he was vulnerable. So whatever led up to this particular point in time, he didn't take the proper precaution in traveling to do what he needed to do in this physical world. So he ends up captured. Right? So he ends up captured and he gets pulled into the circle. You know how it goes. Can't get outside of the circle. And so they take his helm, take his sand, take his jewel because he's unconscious at this time. And of course, they know not to break the circle. Now, always there's a crow that travels with Dream or with Morpheus. So there is a crow at the time that is with him and that sees what's going on. So there's a crow that's there. We know crows are symbolic to that same energy, death, the darkness, so forth and so forth. So there he is now. He's trapped by some amateur of a musician. An amateur, all because he wanted more physical treasures and he really had no concern at all concerning the balance or what that would do. Like, bro, what would you do if you capture death? Like, don't you know there's a higher order to things that you are disrupting? But of course, this is the particular type of character that a Roderick Burgess is, because that's what happens when that type of knowledge get in the wrong hands, because it's that type of intention. It's only off of physical gain, it has nothing to do with spiritual enlightenment, which is what the knowledge is really supposed to be for. But of course, it's corrupted, right? So they have to show you that corruption. They have to show it to you that way. This is what this pretty much gets you, right? So he don't have no concern over how what he's disrupting, what type of imbalance he's creating, and what that would mean for anything or anyone else. And it really led to a lot of people, going into what they call the sleeping sickness. So they was falling asleep, not being able to wake up at all. And it affected millions of people everywhere in the whole entire world. But it's because he was captured, because he wasn't there to maintain the balance to do his job. So now that he's captured, right, Corinthian, because at the time he knows that something had to happen to him, so he visits the Magus, or the Magus, and he informs him on how to keep Dream trapped so that he could, and he only told him this not so Burgess could get what he wanted, but only so he could get what he wanted. See, everybody who helps us isn't always our friend, right? Everybody who helps us isn't always our friend. Sometimes it's to their means to their end as well. So he told him how to keep Dream captured. He told him to make sure that he, you know, and this is because Dream is the only one who can stop him, because he is the only one who can keep him from doing what he's doing in the real world, which is what he seems to be enjoying. And Roderick doesn't even know who he's captured. He doesn't even know which one of the endless he has, nor the importance of it, because he says, what, he's like, well, what good is it to have a man, to the God that governs dreams? And Corinthians says, well, he's more than a God. And is man not governed by his dreams? And he also informs him that his three items can render him some of his power, like extending your lifespan, make you able to your lifespan, make you able to manipulate other people, things of that nature, being able to grant dreams to get what you want. So he told him that he had to put Morpheus inside a sphere of glass. So he had to encompass him in a sphere, in a sphere, in a circle, because we had to think about geometric shape in terms of creation. So if you keep him in a sphere, he can't create outside of that sphere. He can't, the energy can't go outside of that sphere. So he told him to keep him in the glass. Don't let anybody fall asleep around them. Told them a certain type of drug to give to the people so they wouldn't be sleepy around them. He lets them know that they were being watched by a crow. The crow was watching them, and Dream never travels without a crow, so the crow was always going to be a problem. So Roger didn't know what the hell he was doing. So he captured endless, not even knowing who, what he captured, what he was capable of, what he could get. None of that. He don't know nothing. Complete ignorance. So he's completely ignorant, but he's competitive in being an occult master. He's driven by his own ambitions, his own physical desires, his own, you know, that's what he's driven by. So Roderick is trying to talk to him, of course. He wants to receive something. Give me something. Give me some power. Give me some will. Give me immortality. Because, of course, it's what they all fear. They fear the death. They fear the unknown. Not knowing what's for them or the nothingness that awaits them. The complete and utter darkness. Right? So he just wants something. Like a typical white man, European occultist, not to see anything beyond the physical, fearing death because it's not for him. So he's continuing to ask for gifts, continuing to ask for gifts. And Dream states that these are not mankind's to receive. It's not for you to have in your experience as a human being, nor did he have the power to even give them to Roderick. So he never said anything, it was nothing for him to say to him because he couldn't give him those things. But his tools that he had that he took from Dream, they brought youth, they brought prosperity to Roderick. So he got a lot of good luck. You think about the ruby, what the ruby brings to you, so they're still remain suffering from the sleeping sickness. And it's been well past the decade now at this point when they're showing us, because they show us Roderick's son growing up and him still being a prisoner pretty much in his basement or in his dungeon, so to speak, beneath his manor. So his son Alex, who was a child when this initially happened, he witnessed. He's growing up, he's very intrigued by him. He really seems as though he wants to let him out, but he lacks the approval of his father. He yearns for his acceptance, he yearns for his father's love, and he's afraid of his father. So instead of helping Morpheus, he ends up alienating himself more from him, or pretty much pissing him off because he shot the crow and killed his crow. So that really pissed Dream off. It hurt him to lose his to do that to him, and he didn't forget it. He did not forget that. So um all of this is still going on. The world still suffering from the disease, from his absence. And this is where we see Roderick in a relationship with a woman, and she ends up being his baby mama. And she ends up stealing these items from Roderick when he tells her to go get an abortion. Well, I don't want no baby, go get an abortion. And she's like, okay, sure, I will. She robbed him, took his stuff, went off, left, boom, had a baby. We don't see her, right? So, um, that persists. That's what happened. That's how the sand, the ruby, the ham is stolen from Roderick. So now Dream is still locked up because, mind you, now he's been locked away for, at this particular time, it's been like 10 years or so. So he's seen a crow die. And now his items have even left from his presence. So he's been without these items that have pieces of himself connected to it. So he's at his weakest state, pretty much, so to speak. Now, further along in it, later on, so after, we see Roderick and his son, and they argue. He hits his head. Maybe he has a heart attack. I think maybe he has a heart attack. But his son Alice inherits everything. But he continues to keep Dream locked up. He continues to keep him there. Alice even gets old. At this point, he's been there 100 years. He's been there 100 years. Finally, the circle gets broken. He gets out. Even though Alice is in his old age, he grants him the gift of eternal sleep. So it's like endless dreams and nightmares. So that's what he did to Alex. He killed the crow, and he, in some way, felt like all of this was still burden upon him. So it was a gift, but it wasn't a great gift. You know what I'm saying? So, um, and at this very moment, they show us Corinthian knowing that he's free. It's time for him to run because he's just a rogue nightmare. Now, So now that Dream has escaped, he makes his way back to his realm. After he gets back to his realm,